bit. Well, some of you have probably seen this slide in a video before, or you feel a little bit different, but we're going to talk a little bit about inferences versus flaws. I think we've already covered this a little bit, but does anybody, Amber, like, do you know what the difference between an inference and a flaw is?
I do, but I don't at the same time.
You're like, I know in like real world what they are, but when it comes to the LSAT, you're like, I'm not even gonna try. What about you, Natalie? Do you know?
The difference between inference and implies?
Inference and flaw.
Oh, okay. So I feel like with an inference, it's kind of like almost like an accurate conclusion that you can make, but a flaw is like something is wrong with what you're saying, and the premises like don't really support the conclusion.
Excellent. Okay, I did not know this until way too far along in my LSAT studying. So we have these stimuluses, right? And most of them are arguments. And what makes an argument, Crystal? What does it have?
I was just typing the accurate conclusion you can make thing.
A conclusion. Yes. Oh, I think you know it. So an argument has a conclusion. But is every single conclusion on the LSAT valid?
No.
No, I did not realize that not just flaw questions have flaws. There are other argument stimuluses that are also flawed. So each argument is either an inference, or in other words, a valid conclusion, or it's a flaw. And so what we have is for inferences or conclusions, we have two premises or maybe three premises. And when we come to our conclusion, it's valid. It's 100% accurate. Where in other situations, they give us premises, but they might even sound really good, but they don't guarantee that conclusion. And so we really have to understand the difference between those two as we move into some of these new question types. So must be true, most strongly supported, even paradox to an extent, are a lot of inferences, just taking things as facts. But as we transition into flaw questions, strengthen questions, weaken questions, evaluate questions, we really need to recognize what the gap is between these premises and these conclusions. And we have to start getting extremely critical. So every time we read an argument, you have to think of the person that you hate most in life. If they were saying this, how would you destroy it? So, for example, my favorite argument, it's hot outside, so we should get ice cream. Is this a valid conclusion or is this flawed? Give me a thumbs up if you think reaction. You can either do a reaction or a thumbs up if you think it's valid, or a thumbs down or a thumbs down reaction if you think it's flawed. Lindsay's leading the pack. Team Lindsay. Who has thoughts? I don't see any thumbs. Okay, Carla.
Wait, is the thumbs for?
I think valid, not
okay.
flawed.
Okay.
So let me say this again. So I could say valid. I could say valid, or a valid. I would say valid conclusion, or I might say not valid or flawed. So not valid or flawed is synonymous. All right, so we have some people. Okay, we have some mixed opinions here. So people that think that it's valid, why do you think it's valid? So let's have Amber go first. Why do you think this is a valid argument?
Because it kind of makes sense as an option, like, oh, it's hot outside, so let's go get ice cream to me. So I don't know if I'm bringing in other information.
You are speaking to my soul, because I am like you. I'm optimistic. I'm like, that makes sense. Who's going to argue with this? So if your friend comes in and is like, hey, Amber, it's hot outside, let's go get some ice cream, you're not going to be like, no, you idiot. Nobody does that, right? That would never happen. But on the LSAT, what does being hot outside have anything to do with getting ice cream? Nothing. And that's why it's flawed. And this right here is why the LSAT is able to trick us, is because they put common sense arguments there that sound good, but technically we don't have 100% support for them. Natalie? What was
I
your-
don't know if I'm, oh, sorry. I don't know if I'm just like overthinking this. But I feel like it could help me like in general with flaw questions. Couldn't you say that it's hot outside supports the conclusion of we should get ice cream, so therefore it's valid?
Is there a difference between supporting an argument and guaranteeing an argument? Yeah. Sorry,
I think
sorry, Natalie or Yeneth. I'm sorry. I don't want to cut Natalie off, but I know Yeneth has a thought.
I would love to hear their thought because I'm I'm not sure of the answer.
I think in order to support that it's hot outside, we have to find out what is the meaning of hot outside. Is 80 degrees, 90 degrees, 100
Okay,
degrees.
I like how you're okay.
So if we
In life, or not, sorry, in the LSAT, I love how you're thinking about like, we don't know what hot means. And that is true. But if it's 70 or 80 or 90, does that change? If any one of these were true, would it guarantee the conclusion?
I think it does, because if the stimulus says in Arizona, whenever it's 80 degrees, people tend to go to get ice cream. So Nicole asked her
You
friend,
brought in outside information, right? You brought in Arizona. So it's hot outside, so we should get ice cream. While in the real world, people do tend to get ice cream when it's hot outside. Just because it's hot outside, does that mean that you have to go get ice cream or you should get ice cream?
No.
So let's think about it. How many people have kids? Let's say your kids were awful all day. And then at 5 o'clock, they're like, hey, mom, it's hot outside. We need to go get ice cream. Are you like, yep, valid argument. Let's go. What would you say to that? Britton?
You're grounded.
You're grounded. Are you going to get ice cream?
I would tell my dog no.
No. Yeah. Like, no, we're not going to get ice cream. Or what if they didn't eat their dinner and they're like, Mom, like, they're like, I made the dinner. I worked all day. It's your favorite. And you're like, well, I don't like this anymore. And then they're like, but it's hot outside. So let's go get ice cream, Mom. What are you going to go? Is that valid? No. So let's go back to Natalie's point where she's like, but I feel like it being hot outside does support the conclusion. That is true, right? It is like it being hot outside is like +1 for getting ice cream, right? But we don't know what else is going on for why we might not get ice cream. Does that make sense? Can we see why I know this is a very like small, silly example, but this is what the LSAT does to show us why these things are wrong. And next week, when we talk about strength and weaken questions, we'll see. So this argument, we have +1 here for it being hot outside to get ice cream. We'll talk about how we can add more premises to strengthen the argument so we should, or we'll talk about how we can add more premises to weaken the argument so we actually should not. But we'll talk about that next week. But that's how flaws and strengthens and weakens all kind of relate to each other. All right. So here, I know if you watch the video, this is the same example, but I just want to talk about this one. So here, let's go ahead and read the first one where it says, every time Nicole goes to the brewery, she plays chess and orders an IPA. Since we went to the brewery, she orders a beer. Yes, Britton?
I'm still a little confused on flaws though. So like what exactly are we looking for?
We'll get to it. And
Okay.
I have more slides. I just wanted to, I have more. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm still just right now. I'm still even just exposing us to how flaws work in common sense world so that we can tackle tough questions on the LSAT.
Okay.
So it's okay if you're still kind of like, I don't like this. So phase 2 now. So we have this. Our first step is to find the conclusion. So in this first paragraph up here, what is the conclusion of the first little stimulus at the top? What do you, Ian, I've never called on you. Ian. He's like, yeah, I don't want to talk. Sorry, Ian. All right, what about Kylie? Do you know?
Wait, could you repeat it one more time?
Yeah, what is the conclusion for the one at the top here?
That she orders a beer.
Yes. So what we want to determine is, do our premises guarantee this conclusion? So what our premises are, every time Nicole goes to the brewery, she plays chess and orders an IPA. For people that don't know what an IPA is, what is an IPA? Does anybody know what an IPA is? Yaneth?
It's a type of beer.
It's a type of beer. Yeah, there we go. So I was trying to be tricky there. So we know every time Nicole goes to the brewery, she plays chess and she orders a beer. So now we know we have another premise that I went to the brewery. So is it a valid conclusion that I order a beer?
I think it does, but it doesn't
Yeah.
state what kind of IPA you order. It
Yeah,
just says
I don't
beer.
say
It
that.
just
I just say a beer. So like if I said, Nicole has a cat, therefore she has a pet, like that's valid, right? Like it doesn't, like that's kind of the same thing, right? Category wise, IPA, a beer type of IPA. So do we see how this is a valid argument? Because our premises support the conclusion. We have proof for it. But now let's look at the one at the bottom here, where it says, every time Nicole goes to the brewery, she plays chess and orders an IPA. Since she went to the brewery, she enjoys IPA beer. What is my conclusion here? Lucy, are you there?
Yeah,
All right, what is my conclusion for the second one?
Nicole enjoys IPA beer.
Yes. So we have the same premises here, right? So we have Nicole goes to the brewery, she plays chess, and she orders a beer, essentially. I go to the brewery. Does that mean that I enjoy IPA beer? Go ahead and put in the chat, yes, valid or flawed. All right, Kiana, what is it, valid or flawed?
It's flawed. I think
Yeah,
it's just being an
why?
assumption because it's an
It's-
assumption.
Wow, what is it assuming?
It's assuming that someone like you just went to the brewery, you like IPA beer.
Yes, but why is it a tricky assumption? You're right, but why is it a tricky assumption? Because like, why would
Mhm.
someone read this and be like, "Oh yeah, that's a valid conclusion"? Like, why would they be tricky?
I think it says since she went to the brewery.
Yeah, so I go to the brewery. It's because what happens when I go to the brewery?
She plays chess and orders an IPA.
Yes, and so what is it easy to assume here if we're not being really critical?
You like an IPA?
Yes. Has anybody ever done any, unfortunately in life, have we ever done anything that we don't actually like just to impress people that were around?
Yes.
Me too. Where I'm like, I don't like tequila, but I'm going to take tequila shots because that's what all my friends are doing. So they're like, every time Nicole goes out with Lauren, she takes tequila shots. Therefore, Nicole likes tequila. Like, no, I'm just trying to impress Lauren. Right? So just because I do something doesn't mean I enjoy it. I wish I was stronger than that, but that's not always true, right?
Could you say that I put flawed, but then I said maybe that's the only beer they sell?
Yeah, exactly. And that is, yeah, I mean, and you could come up with any of these if you're attacking it. So do we see do we see the difference between the top and the bottom stimulus? The difference between ordering something, like doing something, and then having it, like enjoying it. So I always feel so silly breaking it down to this level, but this is exactly what the LSAT does. And it's these minute details that if you can learn on early on how to start looking for them, it's going to change your studying. I hope Lauren's like, yeah, trust me. She's like, don't drink tequila when you're studying for the LSAT. All right, so then my last question is, or another example here is, I wanted to put this together where we're going back to that Kelly and Sandy and NASA example. And what is the difference between all of these different options? Like, what does it mean for could be true, could not be true, valid conclusion, and invalid conclusion? Can you in your head say what each of these is asking for? Because that's what you need to be able to do on the test. Because these are different, right? So go ahead and just take like a minute and just write down, like, what does it mean for something that could be true, could not be true? What does it mean for something to be valid and invalid? And then we'll just go through them real quick. You don't have to come up with examples. I just want you to be able to explain what they are. So could be true. If we're looking for something that could be true, this just means something that could happen, right? It doesn't have to happen. It just might happen. So this, if we're going back to, could be Kelly and Sandy have one other hobby. That could be true, right? Where could not be true is something that we know for certain could never happen. So maybe could not be true would be Sandy and Kelly and Sandy have lots of time for other hobbies. Can't be true. Where a valid conclusion, how is Sandy, I'm gonna ask Sandy, how is a valid conclusion different than could be true?
I just thought of it as like could be true, like it's like a possibility.
Oh, I like that word.
Valid conclusion is like it actually follows through.
I love that. Could be true is it's possible. Valid means it must be true. And then an invalid conclusion then is going to be something that that like we just don't know. So technically our could be true could also be an invalid conclusion. So if I said, therefore, Sandy and, is it Kelly? Sorry, you guys are covering my stimulus. Kelly and Sandy do have another hobby. If that was my conclusion, while it could be true, right? Because flawed arguments could be true. We just don't know for certain, right? So if we go back to that example of it's hot outside, therefore we get ice cream. Could it be true that we should get ice cream? Yes, right? It could be true, but does it have to be true? Must it happen? No. So this is kind of bringing us full circle. Is this helping to see the full picture? Where we can see like our different goals of how we need to think about things. Excellent. I've never done this slide before, but I think it kind of helps break it up a little bit. All right, so let's go ahead and do one more. This one's for you, Ian. But go ahead and think about this one. So I want everybody from these premises, I want you to think of what could be a valid conclusion and what's an invalid conclusion.